Hello there. 2,540 more people were lost to the undertaker in the week to the 21st of April than the rolling 5-year average. Why? Let me say that again. In the UK, 2,540 more people than normal left us in one single week. And the mainstream media is silent, and this is 22.1% above normal. And these are figures direct from the Office for National Statistics, the ONS, not something made up by some Gilbert in his mother's basement. If this had been the result of some form of deliberate act by a madman at a sports or music event, with these kind of numbers involved, there would be an uproar and wall-to-wall demands for action and investigation. Yet we see nothing from our media nor our politicians, not a murmur. Where are the journalists? Where are the MPs? Where are the guards? Or are most of them safely within the protection of the Westminster bubble with private healthcare and the like? We had Prime Minister's questions today, and as far as I can see, not a peep about this. Those politicians must all now just be accepting without question that their constituents are at increased risk, but they don't want to ask those difficult questions, because it might end up with the whips and the Speaker putting them on the naughty step and them getting letters and emails they have to reply to. And funny how the NHS strike, or parts of it, seems to be endless at the moment, something that could help shield the true cause of all of this. What should worry us all is if these new higher numbers become the norm, or even get worse. And they do seem to be stickily high these days. So 2 major questions. Why is it happening? And why is no one in the press and the establishment bothered about it? Richard.
As Jeff said earlier, 2,500 people have left us permanently in 1 week. Yet, the media are not interested, and instead they are focusing on the industrial level state propaganda pushing a coronation that nobody wants for a king that nobody wants. Well, okay, that's not true. A few people do want this king. And I have to say, I don't watch the mainstream media, and thank goodness I don't. Because other than watching Neil Oliver and Lawrence Fox, and maybe 1 or 2 others, I no longer make a habit of watching GB News, because I cannot watch a channel in such a state of moral flux where fingers are correctly pointed at the World Economic Forum for their actions, yet the same channel then pushes the agenda of the World Economic Forum by ramping up the celebrations of our World Economic Forum king. Some presenters on the channel complain continuously about the moral and political injustice at play in the country, yet say nothing to address the fact that these injustices are presided over and legitimised by our king. There is no escaping this fact. No amount of cultural and historical tradition can separate the fact that the monarchy is not some benign entity that brings in tourists and is the envy of the world. No, the world is actually laughing at us right now. Our monarch is supposed to protect us, the people, from a malevolent state. But when did that last happen? Please tell me, which member of the royal family stood up and said no to the policies of this government over the past 3 years? It didn't hurt at all, said our late Queen about the armed intrusion. Didn't hurt at all, did it? Well, I think the families of over 2,500 people who left us in a week might feel slightly differently about that. All the major royals who weren't sunning themselves on some dodgy sycophant billionaire's grooming island were there telling us that we had to roll up our sleeves. And you can bet your inbred family tree they didn't roll up their sleeves. God save the king. Yeah, well, give us a king worth saving. If our so-called proud tradition of having a monarchy is based upon the virtues of this specific royal family, we need to ask if these are the traditions worth saving. You see, there is more to these lands than being British, English, Scottish, Welsh and Irish. There was a time before these delineated countries even existed, and a mythical time that was equally as enchanting and as great. Oh, what a history we are missing out on. A time before we surrendered ourselves into a national state of Stockholm syndrome to this specific royal family. Because there is something in the soil and etched into the landscape of these lands that make the people great. This royal family has not stood up against the worst excesses of the state and corruption. Instead, it has compounded it. And now we are expected to pledge allegiance to a king who serves an organisation that would enslave us even further and rob us of our freedoms. Shut up and eat your bugs and be happy with nothing. Oh, there is a king coming, and he will be just, and he can't come soon enough. Jeff?
So what's this about Lawrence Fox and the Reclaim Party? I'll read out Fox's tweet for you. If you are concerned about where this country is headed, think about this. The Reclaim Party cannot get a UK bank account, despite 3 years of box-ticking and immaculate compliance. In fact, entire new compliance departments are created just to stop us existing. Also, regardless of having an Experian credit score of 996 to 999, a consistent income and having liquidity in the bank, today I have been declined a mortgage by the last of the 4 major lenders. My car insurance has gone from £1,000 a year to £10,000 a year in the last 2 years. Why am I a threat to them? If they can do it to me, they will do it to you. So a registered UK political party that pushes the envelope cannot get a bank account. But a political party that pushes the accounting envelope, the SNP, can, and it has now been able to source an auditor. And one assumes that Humza Yousaf is hoping he'll now be able to get his hands on that 1.2 million quid of Westminster short money, that's taxpayers' money, by the end of the month. And with the mortgage and the car insurance, there may be another factor involved, that they are concerned that Fox and his property might be actively targeted by lefties. But whatever the excuse, surely this goes beyond the pale, because it sounds very much like the suppression of a political voice to me. Well, the White House has put out a statement that as of the 11th of May, it is dropping the requirement for federal employees, contractors, international travellers, Head Start educators and CMS certified facilities to do their duty and roll their sleeves up. And the statement says, "We are now in a different phase of our response when these measures are no longer necessary." Bango profits for those that were expecting to supply eternal top-ups. But in one area the US is back in old territory, that of hitting the government debt ceiling. And if their Republican and Democrat politicians don't do as usual and agree to raise that ceiling, then according to the US Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, the US establishment will run out of dosh on the 1st of June and they won't be able to service their over $30 trillion national debt. A pile that makes our £2.5 trillion debt pile pale into insignificance. Now the Democrats just want to borrow and borrow and borrow again, while the Republicans want spending cut back, and a game of brinkmanship is being played out to see who caves first to get an accommodation. But what if no one wants to buy their debt anymore if they increase it? Here come the bans. Former Tory Chancellor George Osborne is back in the spotlight, calling for a ban on smoking and a tax on orange juice. He wants the minimum age of smoking to rise every year and to tax sugary foods, telling the Times Health Commission that anti-nanny state Conservatives are not worth listening to. Anti-nanny state Conservatives? Sounds to me like Osborne is now a fully paid-up member of the Nanny State Enforcement Society, the WEF, in other words. Yes, he's now following the WEF line of dictating to the people what they can and cannot do. And I wonder how long it will be before alcohol joins the banned list. How long before even sitting for too long in your comfy chair in front of the telly sparks an angry buzz from your bossy fitness and wellness app? We are slowly allowing ourselves to be caged and enslaved. And don't buy all that stuff about comparing this to seatbelts, crash helmets and the like. We are now watching the inevitable results of ever-increasing nannying. This will never stop until we are personally bossed about by a fitness and wellness app from dawn to dusk, and even getting berated by it for not being able to sleep properly. Somehow I get the feeling that Osborne would be quite content to see travel bans, a UK central bank digital currency and associated social credit scoring, with cameras monitoring us in our homes, no doubt. The erosion of personal freedoms continues. And the banking crisis grinds slowly on. Now, when Silicon Valley Bank failed, I pointed out that many pundits were arguing that this was the start of a slow-motion banking crash. Slow motion because the regulators would fight it all the way, bank by bank as they failed, and they did just that over the weekend by shoehorning the First Republic Bank into JP Morgan. But now the FT is saying this has failed to halt the sell-off in US regional bank shares. And the Telegraph's Ambrose Evans Pritchard says that half of those 4,800 regional banks are already burning through their capital buffers. And once that's gone, those banks are gone, probably to be scooped up by the likes of JP Morgan, just making the big banks even bigger. And as Pritchard says in his article, half of America's banks are potentially insolvent. This is how a credit crunch begins. With one banking report he cites saying that some 2,300 US banks are sitting on assets worth less than their liabilities. Not a good place for a bank to be, one assumes. And worryingly, he says, these lenders include big beasts. One of the 10 most vulnerable banks is a globally systemic entity with assets of over $1 trillion. Globally systemic means if that particular bank goes, then the whole shebang potentially follows it, putting the taxpayer back on the hook for more bailouts to save bankers and their bonuses. If the system can be saved again, that is. And I'll leave the final word to the all-seeing eye.
Well, you beautiful and magnificent creatures, we hope you all enjoyed the show today and return to us again tomorrow. And don't forget to subscribe to our new Short Clips channel, where our musings are broken up into bite-sized chunks for your pleasure. Yes, go over to the imaginatively named Jeff Taylor Clips channel, link in the descriptions box, and subscribe, and don't forget to press the little bell and then select the all option, or Jeff won't love you anymore. And whilst you're at it, you may want to check that you have selected the all option on this channel too. You never know, you might have been naughty and forgotten to do it, and YouTube won't send you any of our videos, and instead will fill your timeline filled with videos of kittens and badgers and other horrible furry little critters. So tell us what you think of what we had to say in today's video, and leave your creamy pearls of wisdom in the comment section below, even if we don't like what you have to say and you are completely wrong. And we will see you again tomorrow at 5:45. 5:45. Ooh.